cancer changes relationships. Sometimes it strengthens them. Sometimes it exposes fractures that were already there. And sometimes it changes how people talk to you, touch you, look at you, or whether they stay at all. And one of the most painful parts of cancer is that many survivors quietly discover they are carrying not only the physical weight of the disease, but the emotional weight of everyone around them as well. Because cancer is not just a medical event. It can be a relationship earthquake. It can shake marriages, friendships, families, parenting, intimacy, identity, trust, roles, communication, expectations. And often the aftershocks continue long after treatment ends. You can expect cancer to change your body, but you may not expect it to change your marriage, your friendships, your family, and the way you see the people around you. So let's talk about it. This is the After Cancer Podcast. I'm your host, oncology physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Waltke. For more than 3 decades, I've walked alongside people living with and beyond cancer. Whether you are a survivor, a caregiver, or part of a clinical team who cares for them, I'm glad you're here. Because life after a cancer diagnosis can feel uncharted and confusing, even when you have a great medical team. In this podcast, evidence, empathy, and the real human experience come together to help you navigate the physical, emotional, and practical realities of cancer and the life that comes after. This is the After Cancer Podcast, rooted in medicine, spoken in human. Hello, everyone. I am glad to see you, and welcome to episode 14, The Relationship Earthquakes, How Cancer Changes Marriages, Friendships, Families, Intimacy, Parenting, and the Invisible Expectations Between People. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Cure, and this week also by my allergy-challenged vocal cords. So let's see how this one goes. Here we are talking about one of the most emotionally loaded, complicated, and under-discussed parts of the cancer experience, relationships. And not just romantic relationships, all relationships. Because when people think about cancer, they typically think about surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, scans, medications, hair loss, nausea, or the survival statistics. Yet, what many people are not prepared for is how profoundly cancer can reshape human connection. I have worked with people living with and beyond cancer for decades. And over again, I have watched cancer change the emotional landscape of people's lives. Some relationships become incredibly deep and meaningful. Others become strained. Some disappear completely. And many survivors are left asking themselves questions like, why did people stop calling? Why do I feel so strangely alone? Why does my relationship feel different now? Why do I feel misunderstood? Why am I carrying everyone else emotionally while trying to survive myself? And I want you to hear me clearly right at the beginning of this episode. If your relationships changed after cancer, you are not abnormal. You are human. Going through or being in a cancer experience can create relationship earthquakes because it disrupts the emotional stability of entire systems. The diagnosis may happen inside one person's body, but emotionally, cancer enters the lives of everyone connected to that person. Partners become caregivers. Children can become scared. Parents feel completely helpless. Friends become uncomfortable. Coworkers can become awkward. Families may become emotionally dysregulated. And all of this happens while the person with cancer is simultaneously trying to process trauma, survive treatment, manage symptoms, and make life-changing decisions. One of the things survivors commonly tell me is, I felt like I had to manage everyone else's emotions. And that makes sense neurologically and psychologically. When humans are under stress, we often move into survival behaviors. Some people become hyper-involved. Some emotionally shut down. Some become avoidant. Some become controlling. some overfunction, and some just disappear. None of those reactions automatically mean someone is bad or uncaring. Most people just simply have no idea what to do. Yet, this can still deeply hurt the survivor. So let's start with this one. One of the biggest areas where this shows up is in marriages and partnerships, because cancer changes roles. A spouse often suddenly becomes a caregiver. Now they're worried not only about themselves, but they also have to worry about the one they love. A partner may become responsible for medications, transportation, finances, wound care, childcare, or household management, bringing home the paycheck. And those role changes can create enormous emotional pressure. Research consistently shows that cancer affects both patients and caregivers psychologically. Caregiver distress rates are incredibly high, especially when treatment is prolonged or the future feels uncertain. And here is something important. You can have one person completely overwhelmed and still the other person feeling completely unsupported. I have seen relationships where both people were suffering deeply, but neither person felt emotionally seen by the other because both were surviving in different ways. One person may want to talk constantly about fear. The other may emotionally shut down because talking about it feels unbearable. One partner may want closeness. The other may become exhausted and withdrawn. One person may interpret silence as lack of caring. The other may believe they are being strong. And underneath all of that is usually fear. Fear of losing each other, fear of burdening each other, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of the future. Now, here's another reality I want to talk about honestly because I have seen it clinically for years. People often assume that if cancer ends a marriage, it is because the healthy spouse leaves the person with cancer. But honestly, what I often see is completely the opposite. I have seen many survivors make it through treatment, arrive at the end of active care, and then realize how emotionally unsupported, unseen, abandoned, criticized, or alone they have felt through the entire experience. And once treatment ends, they march themselves to the courthouse, not because cancer created all the problems, but because cancer exposed them. That observation is uncomfortable for people sometimes, but it is real. Cancer has a way of stripping life down to emotional truth. And many survivors come out of treatment realizing, I cannot continue living in relationships where my emotional needs never mattered. Yet on the flip side, cancer often does one of two things to a relationship. It can make it a whole lot worse, but it often makes it a whole lot better. I've also seen relationships become stronger than anyone thought possible. I've seen spouses who showed up to every appointment, learned how to empty drains, manage medications, slept in uncomfortable hospital chairs, and quietly carried fears they never shared because they were trying to stay strong for the person they loved. I've seen couples who learned to communicate in ways they never had before, who stopped splitting the small stuff, who discovered a deeper appreciation for one another because they were suddenly confronted with the possibility of loss. I've seen adult children become extraordinary caregivers. I've seen friends step up in ways that still brings tears to the people's eyes that they cared for. I've seen families rally around one another and emerge more connected, more grateful, and more resilient than they were before the diagnosis. For some people, cancer becomes the catalyst that helps them finally say the things they've needed to say for years. It creates honesty. It creates vulnerability. It creates perspective. The reality is that cancer doesn't create character as much as it reveals it. It shines a bright light on the strengths and the weaknesses that were already present in a person and in a relationship. And sometimes that light exposes fractures that can no longer be ignored. But sometimes it illuminates a depth of love, commitment, and partnership that people never fully appreciated until they were forced to walk through something incredibly difficult together. Now let's talk about intimacy. Another issue that we in oncology and in medicine in general often don't have enough time to discuss. Many survivors no longer feel at home in their own bodies after cancer, and that changes intimacy. But first, let's define what intimacy is, because even though people use the words interchangeably, intimacy is not the same thing as sex. Matter of fact, it is completely different. Intimacy is emotional closeness. It's feeling seen, known, understood, accepted, and safe with another person. Sex can certainly be one expression of intimacy, but intimacy is much broader than that. Intimacy can be holding hands during a difficult conversation. It can be laughing yourself to tears with your college roommate. It can be a pre bedtime cuddle with your grandchild. It can be sitting quietly with a tech after a difficult scan. It can be crying in front of someone without feeling judged. It can be sharing fears you haven't told anyone. It is feeling comfortable enough to be completely yourself with another human being. A cancer experience can be disruptive to intimacy with the people around you. Again, in both positive and negative ways. And here's another huge cancer disruptor. Cancer changes bodies. It changes energy levels. It changes hormones. It changes confidence. It changes how people see themselves. Surgical scars, hair loss, weight changes, ostomies, reconstruction, amputations, sexual side effects, neuropathy, fatigue, early menopause, erectile dysfunction, pain, and physical limitations can all affect the relationship someone has with their own body. I've heard survivors say things like, I don't recognize myself anymore, or I don't feel attractive, or I don't feel like the person I was before cancer. And when someone no longer feels comfortable in their own body, it becomes much harder to feel comfortable being vulnerable with someone else. And when it comes to sex, for some people, sex becomes frightening. For others, it becomes emotionally complicated. Some worry their partner no longer finds them attractive. Others pull away before their partner has a chance to reject them. Some partners become afraid to initiate affection because they don't want to cause pain or say the wrong thing. And suddenly, both people are protecting each other while unintentionally creating distance between themselves. What makes this especially difficult is that many couples never openly talk about it. They discuss appointments, they discuss medications, they discuss scan results, but they don't discuss the grief. They don't discuss desire. They don't discuss identity. They don't discuss what it feels like to look in the mirror and see a stranger staring back. And yet those conversations are where often healing begins. Because intimacy, body image, sex, and relationships after cancer are not always about getting back to who you were before. It's about learning how to reconnect with who you are now, and allowing the people who love you to reconnect with that version of you as well. Sometimes survivors begin to avoid relationships not because they don't love others, but because they no longer recognize themselves. And that distinction matters. Research shows sexual health concerns, friendship concerns, relationships with colleagues, and body image after cancer are extremely common. Yet many patients report never receiving meaningful education or support around these recovery and survivorship issues. And this silence creates shame. People quietly think, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel disconnected? Why don't I feel desirable anymore? But often the issue is not a lack of love, it's a loss of safety inside the body. And we're going to talk much more deeply about that coming up in episode 15, titled Your Body Did Not Betray You. Now, I know that title will make many of you immediately push back and say, oh, yes, it did. And I understand why. But what if we've been telling ourselves the wrong story? What if the body you're angry at is not really at fault? And it is the same body that survived chemotherapy, recovered from surgery, tolerated radiation, healed wounds, fought infections, adapted to loss, and carried you through every difficult day you thought you couldn't make it through. Next week, we're going to flip the script on that concept, and we're going to talk about resilience, recovery, and why your body may deserve more gratitude, compassion, and trust than you're able to actually give it right now. So now let's go back to relationships, and let's now move on to friendship, because this is another area that can hurt survivors of all genders profoundly. Many survivors discover that some friendships become stronger after cancer, but many others quietly disappear. and some suddenly and shockingly disappear, and those losses can be devastating. People often know how to show up during the initial crisis. They send cards, meals, flowers, text messages, but as treatment continues, or after treatment ends, support often fades, and survivors are left sitting in the silence afterward, wondering, where did everybody go? Part of this is because illness makes people uncomfortable. Cancer forces people to confront your mortality, their own mortality, uncertainty, vulnerability, and the lack of control. And many humans psychologically avoid things that activate fear. Some people disappear because they do not know what to say. Some because they feel helpless. Some because they become emotionally overwhelmed. And some because the relationship perhaps simply did not have the depth the survivor believed it did. That realization can be heartbreaking. And none of those things are at all excuses, but they do happen. And in this same realm, another painful dynamic survivors experience is toxic positivity. People say things like, everything happens for a reason. Well, at least you're alive. Or you're so strong. Or hey, you beat cancer. And while those comments are often intended kindly, they can unintentionally silence honest emotional experiences because survivors may still be grieving, still exhausted, still afraid, still physically limited, still traumatized. And sometimes people around them desperately want the survivor to become emotionally reassuring again because it helps everyone feel safer. But healing is not a performance. One of the loneliest periods for many survivors is actually after treatment ends. During treatment, there is structure, appointments, monitoring, attention, support. And then suddenly, treatment stops, and the world often expects the survivor to move on. But psychologically and physically, many people are only beginning to process what just happened. Research has shown that the fear of recurrence, anxiety, hypervigilance, depression, and social isolation are incredibly common after treatment. Yet survivors hear things like, "You look great." And what people do not realize is that appearance and internal experience are not the same thing. A person can look healthy and still feel terrified. Now let's talk about families and parenting. Cancer changes entire households. Parents often try to protect children emotionally while simultaneously surviving themselves. Children, meanwhile, are incredibly perceptive. Even when adults hide information, children can sense fear, tension, exhaustion, and uncertainty. Adult children may suddenly become caregivers for parents. Parents may feel overwhelming guilt watching their children worry. Spouses may hide their own fear to protect each other. Families may stop communicating honestly because everyone is trying not to upset anyone else. And while the intention is love, the result is often emotional isolation. People become lonely together. I also want to briefly acknowledge relationships with medical providers because those relationships matter more than healthcare systems often realize. Many survivors remember the exact clinicians who made them feel seen. They also may remember the ones who made them feel dismissed. When providers rush, minimize concerns, avoid eye contact, interrupt, or emotionally disconnect, patients feel it deeply. But compassionate, validating communication changes outcomes. Feeling emotionally safe and believed matters. It matters psychologically, it matters physiologically, and it matters relationally. And here's another big thing cancer often changes is identity itself. Survivors frequently feel emotionally different after cancer. Priorities shift, tolerance shifts, patience shifts, values shift. Many people become less willing to tolerate superficiality, emotional neglect, or performative relationships. And sometimes this creates distance between the survivor and the people around them. Not because the survivor became negative, but because surviving something life threatening or life altering changed what feels meaningful. And that can be isolating, but it can also be clarifying. And while this episode has focused heavily on relational pain, I do not want to leave you with the idea that cancer only destroys relationships. I've also seen extraordinary growth and love emerge after cancer. I have seen marriages deepen, friendships strengthen, families reconnect, communities rally, partners become unimaginably compassionate, children become emotionally wise beyond their years. I have seen people discover who truly shows up. I've also seen survivors become more honest, vulnerable, emotionally courageous, and relationally intentional after cancer than they ever were before. Sometimes cancer strips away illusion, but it also reveals truth. And truth, while sometimes painful, can ultimately create more authentic connection. This has been a very emotionally full episode. So take a deep breath and exhale with a calm confidence, knowing that you are okay, even if you feel like you're still growing. As you reflect on today's episode, I want you to think about a few questions. Which relationships changed most after your diagnosis? Did any relationship losses surprise you? Have you felt pressure to emotionally protect other people during your cancer experience? Do you feel fully understood by the people closest to you? And what kinds of support actually feel helpful to you now? And if this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone in your life who may not fully understand how deeply cancer can affect relationships. Maybe it's a spouse or a caregiver, a friend, an adult child, someone on your cancer team, or another survivor who is quietly carrying these feelings alone. And if you are feeling value in these conversations, I would also be incredibly grateful if you subscribed to the After Cancer podcast, left a review, and shared the podcast with others. These small actions genuinely help more people living with and beyond cancer find these conversations. So thank you. Coming up next on the After Cancer podcast, in episode 15, we are talking about something that affects nearly every survivor at some point after diagnosis: the feeling that your body has betrayed you. We are going to explore hypervigilance, fear, body distrust, symptom anxiety, trauma responses, and how survivors slowly begin rebuilding safety inside their own bodies again. Because after cancer, many people no longer trust the body they are living in. And yet, your body is not your enemy. That's all coming up in episode 15 of the After Cancer podcast. Before we go, a special shout out to ABCD After Breast Cancer Diagnosis. After Breast Cancer Diagnosis provides free virtual personalized emotional support by matching anyone impacted by breast cancer with a trained volunteer mentor who has lived a similar experience. Learn more about getting support or becoming a mentor at abcdbreastcancersupport.org. Thank you again for being here today. Relationships after cancer can feel complicated, painful, confusing, and lonely sometimes. But if your relationships did change after cancer, you are not failing. You are responding to something life-altering. Cancer can change people, and cancer can change relationships too. Yet you still deserve honesty. You still deserve support. You still deserve connection. You still deserve relationships where your humanity is fully seen. And always exercise like your life depends on it, because it does. And remember, even when relationships shift, fracture, or change after cancer, you are not alone and you do belong here. Peace out. Let's talk again soon.